There will come a moment in your life when the map fades, when the path that once felt clear now feels like fog. You'll wake up one morning and realize you don't know where you're going anymore. The goals that used to drive you don't stir your heart. The people you once walked with now feel like strangers. The plans you made no longer fit the person you've become. And in that quiet, terrifying space between what was and what's next, you'll ask the question no one wants to ask: what happens when I no longer know the way? That's the moment faith begins. Because faith doesn't start when life makes sense, it starts when it doesn't. When every direction feels uncertain, and yet something inside you whispers, keep walking. The human mind craves clarity, but the soul grows in confusion. God doesn't always give you a map. Sometimes He gives you a lamp. Enough light for the next step, not the whole road. And that's the hardest kind of trust, to keep walking when the destination disappears. Psychologically, this is the breaking point where control dies and growth is born. You can't think your way out of uncertainty. You can only surrender to it. The mind wants to predict, but life invites you to participate. You're not lost, you're being led differently now. The season you're in is not punishment, it's preparation. You're not wandering, you're being rewired. When you don't know where you're going anymore, stop forcing the plan. Start feeling the presence. The same God who guided you before will guide you again. Not through instructions, but through intuition. Through peace that doesn't make sense. Through closed doors that protect and small whispers that direct. So if you're standing in the middle of uncertainty right now, breathe. You're not behind. You're being realigned. You don't need to know the destination to trust the direction. Sometimes not knowing is the only way to rediscover who's really leading you. And that's the secret the wise never tell. That confusion is not the absence of purpose. It's the moment your faith takes the wheel. There comes a time in every journey when the road you've been walking starts to disappear. The signs you used to trust fade into silence. The routines that once gave you confidence no longer make sense. It's as if life takes the map right out of your hands and whispers, now walk by faith. You want to see the path ahead, but God keeps showing you only the next step. You want to feel certain, but all you can feel is change. When you don't know where you're going anymore, the first reaction is fear. The human mind hates uncertainty. It was designed to seek patterns, to find stability. Your brain starts asking questions that sound like alarms. What if I'm wasting time? What if I made a mistake? What if this is the wrong direction? The more you think, the more lost you feel. The more you try to plan, the more you panic, because control has been your comfort. And when it's gone, you mistake peace for danger. Psychologically, we cling to control because it creates the illusion of safety. If I can plan it, I can predict it. If I can predict it, I can protect myself. But here's the truth. Faith teaches protection doesn't always come from planning. Sometimes it comes from pause. The moment life removes your sense of direction, it's not to punish you, it's to position you. You're being recalibrated, recentered, and reminded that your destination is not a place, it's a becoming. This is where the work begins, learning how to walk without clarity. How to trust without proof. Faith is not the absence of uncertainty. It's confidence in uncertainty. It's the voice that says, even if I can't see it, I'll keep moving. Every great transformation begins with disorientation. The caterpillar doesn't understand the cocoon. The seed doesn't understand the soil. The human heart doesn't understand the silence. But it's all the same process, being hidden for a higher purpose. Maybe this is why your plans fell apart. Maybe this is why the door you prayed for stayed closed. Maybe it's why life seems to have slowed down just when you thought it should accelerate. Because direction doesn't always feel like movement. Sometimes it feels like stillness. The pause is not a setback, it's an alignment. When you don't know where you're going, God often hides the next chapter until your spirit is strong enough to read it. Faith takes you places your logic can't. It's the psychology of surrender, the mind's release of control so the soul can lead. You begin to realize that not knowing is not failure, it's freedom. Because when everything is uncertain, anything is possible. God can reroute your life overnight. One phone call, one encounter, one decision, and the fog begins to lift. But you'll never reach that moment if you keep clinging to what you used to understand. When life becomes unclear, the first instinct is to push harder, to fill the silence with noise, to grab your old map and force it to fit your new reality. But that's like trying to navigate a new country with an outdated compass. The landmarks have changed. You've changed. And that's the point. You can't get to a new season using old directions. Ask yourself, what if the confusion you feel isn't punishment, but protection? What if not knowing where you're going is the only way for you to stop depending on yourself and start depending on God? Because when clarity ends, connection begins. When logic fails, faith functions. When you stop explaining, you start experiencing. The mind panics when it loses control, but the spirit rejoices. Because your spirit knows something your mind has forgotten. You were never meant to know every step. You were meant to trust every moment. Sometimes God hides direction not because He's distant, but because He's near, guiding you step by step so you'll stay close enough to hear His whisper. It's okay not to know. It's okay to pause. It's okay to rest in uncertainty. That's where wisdom grows. The people who walk in peace aren't the ones who have it all figured out. They're the ones who've learned that figuring it out isn't their job anymore. Their job is to stay faithful, to keep showing up, to keep moving with grace. So if you find yourself lost, don't rush to escape it. Sit with it. Let the fog teach you patience. Let silence train your sensitivity. Because every detour has a reason. Every delay has a design, and the moment you stop panicking about where you're going, you'll start realizing who's been guiding you all along. When you don't know where you're going anymore, you are exactly where faith begins. The hardest part about not knowing where you're going is not the waiting, it's the silence. That heavy stillness that settles in when your plans stop responding, when doors close without reason, when prayers seem to echo instead of answer. You start wondering if you've done something wrong, if you've fallen behind, if you've somehow missed the path meant for you. But silence is not the absence of direction. It's the space where direction matures. The human mind was built to crave motion. Psychologically, it equates stillness with danger. Your nervous system thinks, if nothing's happening, something's wrong. So it pushes you to fix, to plan, to move, even when God is saying, be still. This is why the pause feels so painful. You're wired for progress, but faith asks for patience. The waiting season is where your old patterns die and new wisdom is born. When life slows down, it's easy to assume you're losing ground. But spiritually, stillness is where God rebuilds your foundation. He removes the noise, the distractions, the illusions of control, so that when He speaks again, you'll actually recognize His voice. Silence isn't a punishment, it's a purification. It's the detox of your spirit. Everything unnecessary starts to fall away. The opinions, the expectations, the need to prove or perform. What remains is something purer, faith that no longer depends on evidence. Psychologists call this process cognitive restructuring. It's when your mind slowly releases old belief systems that no longer serve you. The belief that you always need a plan. The belief that your worth is tied to progress. The belief that peace only comes when you have answers. In uncertainty, those beliefs begin to crumble, and though it feels like falling apart, it's really falling into truth. Faith meets you there in the rubble of what made sense. It whispers, you're not lost, you're being rewired. Because the goal was never for you to have all the answers, it was for you to trust the one who does. And the only way to build unshakable faith is to remove everything that made you feel falsely secure. Think of it this way. When the storm hits, even the strongest tree bends. But the bending isn't breaking, it's adaptation. You are being reshaped for where you're headed next. Every unanswered prayer, every delay, every detour is bending you towards strength. You're learning flexibility, patience, surrender, all the muscles faith requires. And yes, you'll feel alone. You'll feel forgotten. You'll feel suspended between what was and what's next. But isolation is often the incubator of purpose. It's where God does his quietest, deepest work, the kind that doesn't look impressive but changes everything. In psychology, this space is called liminality, the in-between state where the old identity dissolves and the new one hasn't fully formed yet. It's uncomfortable, but it's holy. You're not who you were, and not yet who you're becoming. That's the beauty of divine disorientation. It's the threshold of transformation. Ask yourself, how many times has confusion turned into clarity once you stop fighting it? You'll find that when you surrender the need to know, peace starts flowing in like air. The pressure fades. You start breathing again. You stop forcing the next step and begin noticing the present one. That's how faith heals anxiety, not by removing uncertainty, but by teaching you to rest within it. Stillness teaches you something action never could: trust without control. It trains you to recognize guidance in small ways. A feeling that something's right, a conversation that confirms what you felt, a sense of timing that just fits. These are the breadcrumbs of divine alignment, and you only notice them when you're not rushing. When the mind quiets, the heart starts hearing. It hears whispers like, "This is the way." It feels nudges that say, "Wait one more day." It learns that direction doesn't always come as a voice. Sometimes it's a peace that settles so deep it becomes your answer. You stop asking for signs and start sensing them. That's the psychology of faith, when intuition becomes the new logic. So if life feels paused right now, stop viewing it as wasted time. Waiting is not empty, it's sacred construction. Your character is being built in silence. Your strength is being formed in stillness. The next chapter is being written while you think nothing's happening. You don't have to see progress to trust the process. God doesn't show you what's next, because what's next depends on who you become in this moment. You'll notice something beautiful happening inside you. Your reactions change. The things that used to make you panic now make you pray. The things that once triggered fear now invite faith. You start realizing that your peace is no longer fragile. It's been tested. It's been tried. It's been strengthened by silence. And here's the secret no one tells you. Every great destiny starts in confusion. Moses in the wilderness, David in hiding, Ruth gleaning in empty fields, even Jesus in his quiet years, unseen, uncelebrated, yet perfectly aligned. Purpose often hides in places that feel like pauses. You're not lost, you're being located. When you don't know where you're going anymore, you're not off course, you're being called deeper. And sometimes the only way to hear that call is through silence. There's a quiet shift that happens when you finally stop forcing clarity. You wake up one morning and realize that not knowing doesn't scare you the way it used to. You still don't have all the answers, but something inside feels anchored. You're no longer begging for direction. You're walking with peace. That's the miracle of faith. It turns uncertainty into trust and confusion into communion. At first you thought your problem was a lack of answers, but slowly you begin to see it was a lack of alignment. You were chasing the map when God wanted you to follow His presence. You were asking for details when He was building your discernment. You were praying for visibility while He was teaching you vision. Psychologically, this is where anxiety gives way to awareness. You stop needing to control outcomes because you start believing in purpose. The mind loves order. It wants to understand why things happen and how they fit together. But faith rewrites that script. It teaches you that understanding is not a prerequisite for peace. There are moments you will not comprehend until you've crossed the finish line of that season, and when you look back, you'll see that what felt like chaos was actually choreography. Every delay was design. Every detour was direction. Every silence was strategy. Think about it. How many times did what you thought was a setback end up saving you? How many closed doors protected you from walking into something you weren't ready for? That's how God works. He doesn't just lead you where you want to go. He leads you where you're ready to grow. And sometimes that means leading you through uncertainty so that trust becomes your native language. Faith and psychology both agree on one thing: perception shapes reality. When your perspective shifts from "why is this happening to me" to "what is this teaching me," your entire world changes. Suddenly the unknown stops being a threat and starts being a teacher. You learn patience, humility, and the art of letting go. You discover that peace is not the absence of movement, but the presence of meaning. You start to notice divine fingerprints in small moments, a conversation that comforts you, a delay that saves you, a coincidence too precise to be random. This is what psychologists call pattern recognition, but faith calls it divine timing. It's when everything begins to make sense, not through logic, but through alignment. The same storm that once scared you now feels sacred because you understand it's cleansing the path for what's next. The fog that once blinded you becomes the very thing that slows you down just enough to see what you would have missed if you were rushing. Ask yourself, how many times did you call it delay when it was really protection? When you shift your question from "why me" to "what now," you reclaim your power. You stop being a victim of uncertainty and become a vessel for wisdom. The people who walk with peace are not the ones who always know where they're going. They're the ones who trust that wherever they are, God is already there. In psychology, this is emotional regulation. You stop letting confusion control your nervous system. You start breathing differently. Your mind no longer races for solutions, it rests in surrender. You move from reaction to response, from fear to flow. You learn to see each day as its own sacred assignment, not a means to an end. You begin to live with what psychologists call radical acceptance, the ability to embrace what is without resistance. And when you do, peace returns. Because when you stop chasing direction, direction starts finding you. You'll begin to notice subtle confirmations, small coincidences that feel like whispers from heaven. A stranger says something that answers a prayer you never voiced. A missed opportunity turns into the exact redirection you needed. You start living guided, not driven. You start hearing before you hurry, You stop asking for maps and start trusting the compass within, that still, gentle knowing that says, keep going, I'm still with you. You'll find that the journey becomes less about arrival and more about awareness. You'll start noticing beauty in moments that once felt empty. You'll see meaning in pauses, strength in slowness, and wisdom in waiting. You realize that your purpose was never about finding a destination. It was about becoming a person who can walk with peace no matter the path. This is what divine maturity looks like when you no longer need to know where because you've learned to trust who. Who is guiding you? Who is shaping you? Who is walking beside you in the silence? When you finally grasp that truth, the fog doesn't feel frightening anymore. It feels holy. It feels like grace wrapped in mystery. You may still not know where you're going, but now you know this. You're not wandering aimlessly. You're walking faithfully. And there's a difference. Wandering is when you walk without purpose. Faithful walking is when you move without fear. And the moment you start trusting that difference, peace finds you even in the unknown. At first you walk through uncertainty with trembling hands. You second-guess every decision, overanalyze every silence, replay every closed door. But something begins to change the longer you stay faithful in the fog. The fear that once paralyzed you starts turning into quiet confidence. You stop needing to see 5 steps ahead because 1 step at a time has proven enough. What used to feel like blindness now feels like belief. What once felt like being lost now feels like being led. That's how direction reveals itself. Not through revelation all at once, but through obedience in small moments. You realize that clarity is not something you wait for, it's something you walk into. Each act of trust lights the next step. You pray, you act, you listen, and life starts whispering back. The people you meet, the places you go, even the setbacks that make you pause, they all begin to form a pattern too perfect to be random. You're no longer chasing control, you're following peace. Faith and psychology intertwine here. In the human mind, clarity grows from focus, but in the soul, clarity grows from faithfulness. When you stop panicking about the future, your perception sharpens. You start seeing signs you used to overlook, small moments that confirm you're still on the right path. The problem was never that God wasn't guiding you. It was that your noise was too loud to hear Him. Once you quieted the noise, direction started speaking. You begin to understand that uncertainty was never a lack of progress. It was the training ground for trust. The wilderness wasn't wasted. It was preparation. Every delay built endurance. Every silence built sensitivity. Every detour built discernment. You were being trained to hear whispers instead of thunder. Because when your spirit matures, God doesn't need to shout anymore. Psychologically, this is what growth looks like. You develop emotional endurance, the ability to remain peaceful even when outcomes are unclear. You stop spiraling into anxiety when plans shift. You start flowing with change instead of fighting it. You trust that what leaves your life was never meant to stay, and what's meant to find you doesn't need to be chased. This kind of peace isn't passive, it's power. It's the strength that comes from knowing your path doesn't depend on your panic. Ask yourself, how many blessings did I miss because I was too busy worrying about what's next? The truth is, peace doesn't wait for clarity. Peace creates clarity. When you calm your heart, your steps become clearer. When you stop forcing, life starts flowing. God's guidance feels less like a command and more like a rhythm. Subtle, consistent, gentle. You stop walking with anxiety and start walking with awareness. And suddenly, things that once made no sense start connecting. The lessons from past pain become preparation for present purpose. The people who left make room for those who are aligned. The rejection that broke you becomes the redirection that builds you. You begin to see that God was never silent. He was strategic. The delays were directions. The confusion was camouflage. He was protecting you from roads that looked right but led wrong. Faith isn't about knowing every step. It's about trusting that every step has meaning. The path doesn't have to be perfect to be purposeful. What matters is that you keep moving. Because motion creates momentum, and momentum reveals miracles. You can't steer a parked car. God guides those who keep going, even slowly, even uncertainly, even afraid. And the beauty of walking by faith is this: the more you trust, the less you need to understand. You begin to rest inside divine rhythm. You understand that clarity doesn't come before obedience. It comes because of obedience. Every act of trust becomes an act of revelation. Each day you stay faithful. The fog lifts just a little more. You start seeing outlines of purpose forming ahead, soft but sure. When you look back, you realize the path was never random. The moments that felt meaningless were the threads of a greater design. The silence that once frightened you became the soundtrack of your transformation. The confusion that once broke you became the classroom of your wisdom, and the waiting that once drained you became the witness of your growth. There's peace in knowing you don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to keep walking slowly, faithfully, humbly. Every step you take in trust is a step closer to who you're meant to be, because direction isn't always about where you're going. Sometimes it's about who you're becoming while you walk there. Faith, psychology, and purpose all meet at this single truth: clarity is born through continuation. Keep walking. The way will reveal itself. Don't rush the map. Don't fear the fog. Don't question the quiet. The same God who began your journey knows exactly how to finish it. One day, you'll look back and smile at the path that confused you most, because you'll see how it carried you straight into your calling. There comes a point in your journey when you stop asking, "Where am I going?" and start saying, "Wherever I go, I'm guided." That's when you know you've grown. You've learned that peace is not the reward for finding the path. It's the way you walk it. The confusion that once drained you now feels almost sacred, because it taught you what control never could, that you are held even when you don't know where you're headed. One morning, you'll wake up and realize you're not searching for signs anymore. You're not waiting for permission to move. You've stopped overthinking every step. There's a stillness inside you now, a quiet awareness that you're right where you need to be. The need to prove, to hurry, to plan every detail, it's gone. What replaced it is trust. Deep, grounded, liberating trust. Faith has changed the way you move. You no longer panic when doors close, because you've learned that closed doors are divine communication. You don't force what fades, because you trust that what's meant for you will never require begging. You've stopped seeing uncertainty as punishment and started seeing it as protection. You've realized that sometimes the fog isn't there to hide your future. It's there to reveal your faith. Psychologically, you've built a new kind of strength, emotional flexibility, the ability to stay steady in shifting seasons, the awareness that you can walk without answers, love without guarantees, and rest without knowing what's next. You've trained your nervous system to find calm, even when clarity hasn't arrived. You've discovered the miracle of moving in peace. And that's what the journey was always about. Not finding the perfect route, but becoming the kind of soul who walks through storms with stillness. The kind of soul who trusts that the map is written in moments, not miles. The kind of soul who understands that God doesn't rush his masterpieces, and you are one of them. You'll look back at the seasons that confused you and realize that was the refining. The waiting wasn't wasted, it was working. The silence wasn't empty, it was echoing with direction. The uncertainty wasn't a detour, it was a delivery. You weren't being delayed, you were being developed. Ask yourself, who have I become since I stopped knowing everything? You'll notice something. You're softer, yet stronger. You're quieter, yet wiser. You're humbler, yet braver. You're no longer chasing life. You're walking with it. That's the ultimate transformation, when you stop fearing the unknown because you finally know yourself. The truth is, you were never truly lost. You were just being rerouted. Every step that scared you was still part of the plan. Every no was leading to a better yes. Every silence was teaching you to listen. Every pause was polishing your patience. Now, when you walk differently. Not faster, just freer. You no longer ask, what if it doesn't work? Because your faith has already answered. Even if it doesn't, I'll be okay. You trust the flow. You trust the pauses. You trust the one guiding you through both. When you don't know where you're going anymore, remember this, you're not supposed to. You were never meant to control the map, only to follow the maker. Every time you walk forward in faith, the road rises to meet you. Every time you release fear, peace takes its place. Every time you let go, grace takes over. And one day, when the path clears and you finally see where it was all leading, you'll smile, not because you understand everything, but because you'll realize you didn't need to. You'll see that not knowing was never the problem. It was the invitation to trust deeper, love wiser, and walk slower. Because in the end, direction is not about the destination, it's about the discovery. And you have found it, the peace that walks even when it can't see the way. You may not know where you're going, but you are no longer lost. You are led.